Now to continue where we left off, what we're going to do next is work on this grid section. So let's go ahead and zoom in a bit. And what we'll want to do is create a sort of title for each section that will maintain the current day or date of when those files were uploaded. So we'll want to create a text layer and insert that there. We'll go ahead and write today in all caps. Let's make sure that that is selected and switch the font to Avenir. We're going to set the font size to 12 pixels. And for the style, let's go ahead and make that heavy. And actually, let's do black instead. And for our color, we'll want to give it a gray color, which is going to be 7477B. And I'll make this a shared color also. So I'll go ahead and add it there. And we'll just call this gray. Let's go ahead and create that. Now we'll want to line this to the far left with 20 pixels of left margin. And then from margin top, we're going to make it 32 pixels. Now to make sure we're maintaining best practices for naming our layers, let's just make sure to add a frame. Now this frame's height can be the exact same height as our text layer. So let's just figure out what that is. If we select the text, we've got a height of 14. Now you have several options here. You could stick to that 8-point grid system and then make this a height of 16 and then allow the width of this to extend all the way across until there's 20 pixels of margin left and right. And then now let's center this vertically, not horizontally, but vertically like so. And then we can get rid of the background here. So now that we kind of have this container and we can call this section title or section date. So you could really name these whatever you want, but let's scroll it down here to where it's underneath this frame. And so we didn't name this top frame, this header frame last time. So let's go ahead and name that also. So we'll just call this header. So we've got our header and then we've got our section date. Now this will also get its own frame here in a second, but let's go ahead and work on creating those files. I'll go ahead and select this frame here. And we're going to set the height of this frame to 140 pixels. And for our width, we'll go ahead and stretch it across until it's 20 margin on the right. Next, we'll go ahead and set a radius for this, and we'll set that to 16 pixels. Now the margin top is going to be set to 20 pixels. Right now it is 24. So we'll go ahead and set that to 20. And now you can leave 24, right? Oh, I'm increasing the radius, sorry. Set that back to 16, it was playing with the radius. Now you can increase this to 24. Pixels of margin top, but since our left and right margins are 20 pixels, we kind of want to keep it consistent in terms of the top, bottom, right, and so on. So right now 20 pixels left and right. Let's just make sure the top is 20 pixels as well. When you're using an 8-point grid system, sometimes when it comes to smaller layers, it is okay to sort of start using a 4-point grid system. Typically it's recommended because with 8-point grid systems, sometimes you are a bit limited. Having a 4-point grid system works just as well, but it all comes down to your preference really. Now for this layer, we show a preview of the file. In the final versions, I do have an image showing, but it really is up to you. We can have placeholders where we can set this gray color and then just change the opacity for it. So selecting the color, we'll choose custom, and then we'll decrease the opacity a bit. And then you can just play around with the opacity for the different layers. What I think I'm going to do, since we don't want to spend too much time on the small details, I will show you how to add an image and make it a bit more polished. But all in all, what I would like to do with this application is to build everything out and leave it a bit prototypey / wireframe, and then go back and fill in the details just so that we can really see how we can build an app in different stages and then still make it look good while not having the final product ready. You have a few different options. You can use the Unsplash package, or you can just select image here for its fill and then drop an image. We can also just upload our images from this fill. I like grabbing my images from Unsplash, so if we just select choose here, we can go ahead and upload a photo from there. I'll select this one. And what will happen is that it will fit into the proportions that we set. We can always play around with the dimensions and it would automatically start resizing for us. So let's hit Command Z. Now this isn't the best picture just because this is more of a portrait, and you can see that here it's getting cut off. So we have different options. We could hit fit, which will fit the entire image. We could hit stretch, which we don't want to do. So we'll select fill, but we'll change the image to this one right here, which I do have in the original mock. It will go ahead and upload. And once it's uploaded, you can see the preview here. Again, let's just hold off on this and leave it as that placeholder. With the files being uploaded, we also need some descriptions for them. So we need a title, and then who the photo was uploaded by or the file was uploaded by, and also what the file type is. So those are the three things that I'm going to highlight here as a user scrolling through. I'll go ahead and select a new text layer. And for our first picture, we'll just say our new apartment. So I'm guessing when we upload photos, we have the option to name the file. So I will just say our new apartment with an exclamation point. Our color for this is going to be set to black. The fonts of Avenir, the font of Avenir, the style is going to be heavy, and then the font size is going to be 13 pixels. We're going to push this to the top left here, and then make sure it has a margin top of 12 pixels. We'll go ahead and Option Shift drag down to create a new text layer. And now this text layer is going to have a font size of 10 pixels, and the style for it is going to be set to book. Typically there's like light versions in fonts, so you can just select the light version. Now in terms of the margin top, it is going to have a margin top of 4 pixels, and then we'll rename this to where it displays the file type. So if it's a photo, it might display like JPEGs, PNGs, and so on, all, WebP, all the formats for photos. But I think what I would rather do is just kind of categorize it as a photo. When we upload files, I think most people don't care if it's PNG, JPEGs, or anything like that. For a typical user, they just want to know if it's a photo or a video or an audio. Next, we'll drag it over. Next, we'll go ahead and copy the layer and then change it to say the name of the person that uploaded it. So it's going to be Samantha P, and that's the person that uploaded the file. Now we'll drag this to the far right a bit, and we want some sort of indicator to separate the two text layers. So I will create a new frame with a width and a height of 4 pixels, setting the radius to 100%. Our color is going to be set to gray, and then we will choose custom and drop the opacity down to 40%. Now the margin left here is going to be 4 pixels, but then I do see that for some reason, using Avenir, it adds an extra space on the right. So we're going to make this 3 pixels. Ultimately, with that additional space, it's going to be 4 in total. And then for our margin right with the author, it's going to be 4 pixels, like so. If we zoom out a bit here, you can kind of see this whole preview on the right side, but we've got our title, we've got our file type, and then we've also got the author or the person that uploaded that certain file. We'll go ahead and scroll down a bit, and then we'll attach 2 additional files that were uploaded today. So what we can do here is just copy and paste what we had. Actually, let's work on structuring this a bit better, and then we'll copy paste. So this frame, we'll call it file preview. Our new apartment, we'll call this file title. Photo here, we'll call this file type. Samantha P, we'll call this file author. Round, we'll call this separator. I don't know how to spell separator. S-E-P-A-R-A-T-O-R. Separator, okay. And then let's work on adding everything that we just worked on into its own frame. We'll say add frame, and we'll call this frame file. And then the separator, the file author, and the file type can be in its own category. So we'll add a frame here, and then we'll call this details. So if you're familiar with just building HTML, JSX in general, you can kind of see how that skill set can help here, just simply by organizing and then adding them into their own sort of divs or containers, which can make it a lot easier for us to work with in the future. Now, file title can be, honestly, and it doesn't need to be in its own frame. I feel like after that, it just gets too many frames. And then file preview can be in its own. So let's organize this to where it's file preview, file title, and then the details, which the details have separator, file author, file type. And then they're all grouped up by just one file. We'll go ahead and copy paste file by hitting the Option Shift and then scrolling down. Now the margin top is going to be 20 pixels, which we already did. And I'll set the width of this to 140 pixels. So it's going to be right there. Now the height and the width are equal, which are both set to 140 pixels. and then we could just change the content. So it's not our new apartment. This one's going to be called design system. And then it's not going to be a photo, it's going to be a PDF. And the author is going to be Ryan H. Now let's zoom in here because we've got to fix the margins, because changing the content changed the margins. So make sure that the margin left is 3, and then we'll bring this to where it's 4 margin on the right. Again, we're setting 3 on the left because it seems like Avenir is adding that additional space. If you're working with a different font, it might not look like it. However, looking at this PDF, it seems like we might need to add, because the F isn't really looking like it's adding space. So just play with that, just make sure that they look equal. Next, we can copy and paste this again, and then drag it to have a margin left of 20 pixels. And then for the width of this, just stretch it out until it fills all the way to the right, where it's the right 20 pixels. Now this one is going to be called breakdown, which don't ask me what that means, but it's going to be a video. I need to turn off notifications. It's going to be a video, and then just set the margin. Now it seems like the O is adding extra space, so we'll work around that. And then for the name, we'll go ahead and switch this to Alex P. Just make sure that you align the margins here. We'll set that to 4 pixels. Now in the previous video, we did talk about the fit content feature that Framer provides. And if we look at this layer, the details layer, you can see that its original widths are for this PDF and Ryan H. Actually, the original widths are for the Samantha P, but we didn't change it here either. So instead of adjusting the widths, which would ultimately mess up the way we set the margins, what we can do is just set fit content, and then this will automatically adjust the content to completely fit the widths that we have for video and Alex P, which is pretty neat. We could do the same for the details for this design system file where we fit content, and it would automatically set the widths to the max width of the content inside of that frame. So that's pretty neat in my opinion. We'll do that also for this file because this file's widths are 140, which is set to this design system. Hitting fit content will just adjust the widths of the parent. Perfect. So let's go ahead and zoom out, and then we will take this whole section here and then just make sure that we'll organize it. So we have file, file, file. And what we're going to do is add all 3 files in their own frame. So go ahead and right click and add frame. Now we'll also want to include this title. So the section date will want to go inside this frame above all the files, like so. We'll go ahead and rename this to daily uploads. And I couldn't really think of a better name, but we'll just call it daily uploads. So we've got this daily uploads, which doesn't seem like it's housing today. It seems like the height is only up for these 3 files. But again, if we hit fit content, it will then automatically adjust. We could copy and drag this all the way down here. And now for each section, we are going to set the margin 32 pixels. We don't want it to be 20 pixels because then it will just look like it's blending in with the previous day's file uploads. So fixing that, what we could do is just add a bit of more margin. So from 20 pixels to 32 pixels, and that will give us more space to work with, allowing the user to see that this in fact is for another day. So if we scroll down, it's going to get completely cut off, and that's fine because we're only working on this UI portion. We'll then break this off and then work on the scroller here in a bit, but let's go ahead and adjust this. So for today, it's going to say yesterday. It's going to be all in caps. And then for this section here, it's going to be broken down into 2 files that are equally the same width. So we'll select this first file here, and then we'll adjust the width to where it's going to be 177 pixels. I can't seem to get it correctly, so I'll adjust it here, 177. And then we'll copy this file and drag it over, and then just make sure that the margin left is 20 pixels and the margin right is 20 pixels. I chose 177 because that will evenly break it down in the middle, so you can see the left and the right. Now, before we continue any further, let's stop for a second and allow for us to scroll just so that we can see what we're working with. To allow us to scroll, we'll need to create a new frame. So we'll insert a new frame here. And since we select frame, it's going to remember what our previous artboard that we selected is. And so since we have this artboard of the iPhone, we can just hover over this outline and click, and that will automatically give us the same dimensions as our previous artboard. Now this here is only going to contain a scroller. So if we select insert and search for scroll, let's see what it gives us. So it gives us this default interaction, which allows us to scroll. So we can add a scrollable content. We'll go ahead and insert that. And actually inserting it seems like it will automatically do that for us. But I don't want that. I don't want that. Okay, let's restart this. So insert, we'll do scroll, and then can I adjust it according? No, it automatically does it, but I don't. Okay, we'll just select scroll here. So just select scroll, and then we can create our own custom scroll. So if you select scroll here, and then we can define the dimensions. I mean, that's really cool for Framer to do that, but then we don't want that right now. We'll create it from scratch. That one, Framer just allows you to, be quick and just set it up right away, which is neat, honestly. They give you good examples. That's why I really love this tool so far. So we've got our scroll here. Now this is only going to be the viewport section. What we need to do is create another frame, which is going to be our actual content. So this is only the scroll method, but then the content will live here. Now the only thing that I want us to scroll is everything except this part here. So I will remove this and I will add it here. And I will select everything we've already designed, copy it and paste it right here. Make sure to change the artboard color so that it could be the exact same color as our header. So we've got the exact same look. Now, if I select scroll and then attach it to this artboard, we will then be able to select this iPhone 11 artboard. I should rename these, but we're able to select this middle one and then start scrolling. Once our scroller is attached to the content, we'll need to adjust the height of the content. So let me rename all of this because it's getting a little confusing of having iPhone 11 3 times. So I will say this iPhone 11 here is going to be content. This one is only going to be, if we double tap, scroll. And then for this one, we'll just call it the initial, right? This is going to be the initial UI. So this first artboard doesn't matter right now. So let's just move it out of the picture. We're going to work with these since we copied that initial and just place it into the content. We'll want to adjust the height because if it's the exact same height, we cannot scroll. So if we select scroll and try to scroll here, it allows us to do that scroll, but it doesn't actually scroll the content because the height is fixed to the exact same height as our iPhone. So select content and then let's adjust the height. Let's actually set the height to where it actually ends for this yesterday. So scrolling it down. Okay, now let's adjust the 2 daily uploads to drag them up and make sure that they are 32 pixels from the top for this today. Okay, perfect. Now if we click on the scroll artboard, it would allow us to start scrolling now, like so. Okay, perfect. Now one thing to mention is you can see that this top fixed layer for the status bar is being overlapped and everything is going past it. So let's adjust that. We'll select this scroll and then make sure that the scroll is only available right here so that we don't overlap the scroll top. Now if we start scrolling, it's going to start getting cut off and it won't overlap our status bar. Perfect. Now that we adjusted the status bar, it seems a bit iffy with the white background. So just change the background of the scroll artboard to the same background as our app's background. And then now when we scroll through, it looks a lot better. Looking at it, there's way too much margin here. So we'll need to adjust what's inside this content artboard. Going back to the default UI, if I go ahead and copy and paste the status bar, you can see that it looks a bit better because the margins of this team yellow is 32 pixels, but then looking here, it seems like it's 32 pixels plus whatever the height of the status bar is. So let's adjust this. What we can do here is just make this team yellow have a margin top of 32 pixels. What this means is that we need to adjust the height of this recent files. Let's go ahead and bring this recent file's height down to around 132 pixels. And then we'll select team yellow and then adjust it to where it's 32 pixels margin top, like so. Make sure that it's still 32 pixels with the recent files, which it isn't, it's 31. But then we'll need to adjust this slightly. So we can set it to 32. If you want to adjust it to where it's pixel perfect, we'll actually need to increase the height to 133, just because the height of the recent files isn't 32 pixels, it's 33, and that comes back to the Avenir line height. So let's adjust this to where it's 32 pixels, and then this is 32 pixels, and the bottom is 8 pixels, making sure that this is still 16 pixels from the search bar. So you can see that Just getting used to the 8-point grid system, it can help us out tremendously, but at first it might be tedious just because you need to make sure that everything is pixel perfect. Now we can adjust this accordingly. So we can select everything that's inside this content and then just push it to the top, like so. Actually, not like so. Just move it to the top, honestly, like this. I selected the align top, which since none of this is in its own frame, it's going to pretty much just start overlapping everything. But since we adjusted this now, looking at this scroll artboard, it's a lot better in terms of, that margin from the top. So it's 32 pixels now. And then scrolling through, everything is just a lot more natural in my opinion. Okay, perfect. So one thing I also want to do is when we select the different files, we kind of don't want all of them to look exactly the same. When you're presenting it, a lot of it can just kind of blend in. So something simple as just changing the opacity on them can add some depth. So this one's going to be 32 pixels. We'll switch this one to 8 pixels. This one can be set to 12 pixels. This one right here can have 28 pixels. So now when you're looking at this mock, let's close this fill. Having that sort of depth in terms of the file types can make it stand out a bit more and not necessarily lose the user if you're prototyping this in front of somebody. So let's go ahead and continue. What we'll do next is work on the tab bar, and then we'll create the screen for our search, and that will conclude this video. Now, since I did mention that the breakdown video is going to be a video, what we could do here is add some additional information for the video. So we'll move Alex P to the right a bit, and then for the video, we'll go ahead and add a semicolon and then just put the duration of what the video is. So we'll do 2 minutes and 32 seconds, and then just make sure you adjust the separator accordingly. Select the parent, which is details, and then hit fit content just so that I could fit the entire content. Now zooming out a bit, let's go ahead and add a play button here. We'll go ahead and insert a new frame. Now this frame is going to be 40 pixels for the width and the height. The background color is going to be set to white, and the border radius is going to be 100%. Since it's already nested inside this file preview, what we can do is go ahead and center it, and it will center inside this file preview frame only, which is pretty neat. I don't really like the opacity being set to 50, so I'll bump that up to 100%. And now we want to add a play icon. We can reference our feather icons. So if I just search for play, we'll find this play icon that we can insert, and then it will insert and center it with the circle. Now I'll want to adjust the size of this play icon. So let's bring it down to around 14 pixels, and I'll give it a fill of the purple. But we run into an issue here because feather icons only allows you to edit the fill of the stroke, which is purple. So we have two options here. We can create our own play icon and then just use this feather icon as a reference. Let's go ahead and close fill, and we'll hit G on our keyboard, which will open up the graphic tool, and then we can select path, which is pretty much a pen tool. So let's just copy the exact path of this play button, and we don't need to do it pixel perfect, but we'll do our best. Okay, so that's perfect there. We can adjust the join, which is just the endpoints, so we can make those round. And then for our fill, we can adjust that to set that purple. Our stroke, do we need a stroke? Let's just leave a stroke for now. So stroke will be set to purple. Now let's see how it looks side by side. So it's pretty much there, right? I mean, you could barely tell the difference, except this one is filled. We'll go ahead and delete the one we got from feather icons, and then we'll select this graphic and center it. Now, perfectly centering play buttons never seems centered to me. So adding a additional pixel to the right, so 1 or 2 pixels to the right, always makes it a bit more centered for some reason. Now let's go ahead and zoom out a bit, and we've got our play button here. Again, in terms of the details of how you want the file previews to look like, that's ultimately up to you. Just having an understanding of how we can do it is all we really need. In terms of creativity, that's all on your side. Now let's go ahead and zoom out a bit and work on this tab bar. Now, since the tab bar is going to be fixed, we don't want to work on the tab bar or add the tab bar in this content artboard. We will want to add the contents in this scroll. So I will insert a new frame, and we could just add it to the very bottom. Doesn't matter what the height is, we'll adjust it here. We'll set the height to 96 pixels. And let's go ahead and zoom in because we're going to work on this. We'll change the background color to a white color, setting the opacity to 100%. Now we want to add shadows, which we can do here. Adding shadows creates depth for us, making this tab bar layered on top of everything else. I want to also add that home button, which comes with the iPhone. So accessing that, let's go back to the initial UI here and then see if we can grab that. Okay, there we go. This home button. I'll copy it and then just hit Control-Z so that we can put everything back to how it was. And then back in our new artboard, I'll go ahead and paste it. So adding this here also doesn't really affect us in terms of the scroll. We'll need to add additional margin here, the same margin and some that's equivalent to this 96 pixels. So we'll need to make sure that there's 96 pixels and additional maybe like 20 pixels just so that we can have more room. So now when I try to scroll, it won't let me scroll. And you can see that as I'm trying to go further, we're very limited because we added this fixed frame here. We'll use our friends add feather icons to generate some icons. So I'll hit insert, and the first icon is going to be a folder. We'll go ahead and insert this. We'll insert a new icon. This icon is going to be a bookmark. I'm thinking that the next screen, not this one, the next screen can kind of have like saved files or bookmarked files, just ones you need to access real quick. Finally, we'll insert a settings, which can be our account, settings, profile, all that stuff will go here. Just 3 screens, we're keeping this very simple. Now this bookmark is going to be centered perfectly along the middle. So we've got 194 on the right and 196. So just make sure there's 195, 195. We're leaving the size to 24 pixels. And for the color, since it's not active, we don't want it to be as visible. So we'll select or double tap it so we can select the stroke of the icon, add the gray color, but we want to adjust it. So choose custom and then change the opacity to 40%. Now the margin top is going to be 16 pixels. I'm adjusting the opacity. Let's go ahead and exit out of that and then select it again and then adjust the margin top to where it's 16 pixels. Perfect. And we'll do the exact same for the settings. Selecting the fill, adding the gray color, choose custom, and then adjust the opacity to 40%. Now let's bring this up to where it's aligned with our bookmark and it's 16 pixels top. Now the margins I'm going to select here is 96 pixels to the left. So let's go ahead and adjust this. All right, 96 to the left, and on the right it's going to be 75. Now this isn't going to follow our rules for the 8-point grid perfectly. And sometimes there's some adjustments that you'll need to make because it won't always be 100% perfect. So making this margin left of 96 pixels, it isn't going to be the 4-point or 8-point grid of 75. So you can honestly adjust. You could do 76 and then 95 on the left, or 96 and 75 on the right. I think I'll do 76 on the right because it pushes away from the device's edges a bit more, but honestly it's very minimal. You can't even really tell the difference. So doing the exact same for our folder icon, setting the margin right to 95 pixels, and this will set the left to 76 pixels. Since we are currently on that home screen, which is our folder, which contains all the files that were uploaded, we'll go ahead and set this fill to our purple color. And now we're also wanting to add a sort of fill. So again, we'll go to the graphic tool, selecting the G, and then we can kind of just outline what we have. So it doesn't need to be perfect, just do your best here. And then just align it like so. And then we can adjust accordingly. So just try to align it to the far edges, just so that we can add a fill as our background. And then we'll curve this a little. Okay, so it's really janky looking, but again, that's fine. We're not looking to make it 100% perfect as the outline because we're not going to see the outline, right? We can disable the stroke and enable the fill. And then the fill of this is going to be the Perlu color, except we are changing the opacity. So don't edit the shared color, but just choose custom. And then we'll adjust the opacity accordingly. So we can add a 10% opacity. We can exit out of that drawing mode. And then looking at this, let's check out the layers for our icon. So selecting the folder, we have folder SVG. And then I want to see where that graphic, okay, so the graphic is layered on top. We'll want to layer the graphic underneath the folder SVG, or actually on top, because it seems like it's covering. No, we'll layer it under just because we don't want to change the color of the stroke, right? Adding a layer on top will edit it slightly. But you can see that the stroke is currently just layered on top of it, and then setting it back to how it was, you can see that it kind of looks like a fill. Okay, perfect. Keep in mind when you're playing with a graphic tool, I ran into a bit of issues here and there to where it's a bit buggy. So just keep that in mind. I know that they might add some additional fixes to it because again, it was a bit laggy when working on it. Something else you can do is, let's just say a user uploaded, a file just now, or you get like a notification. Typically on applications, you can find like a circle underneath that screen, or underneath the icon, or maybe to the top right saying you got some notifications. What I like is adding a frame, and we'll set this to 4 pixels by 4 pixels, and then setting the radius to 100%, and then changing the color to that purple blue color, and then just make sure that it is centered with the file like so, and we can make it 8% margin from the top of the file icon like so. And then we can copy this icon, zoom out, and then for today, we'll actually need to add it here in the scroll because it's going to scroll with. But for today, we can add that circle and then just drag it in here and center it along, and then just set a margin left of 4 pixels. So let's go ahead and zoom out, select this scroll artboard, and we can look at the preview here. As we're scrolling down, you can see that everything looks great. Again, we need to adjust the bottom part. So let's adjust the height of the content, scroll down a bit, and then let's push this yesterday file up to where it's 20 pixels, or sorry, 32 pixels from the last item. Okay, now let's take a look at the preview again and scroll down, and you can see that now it's a lot better because there's a bit of margin here. Okay, so that does it for the scroll and the content. Now we can create an additional artboard for our search bar. We'll go ahead and select frame and insert a new frame. So I'll select content, or actually I want it to be like the scroll, right? And select frame. And I wonder if it's going to give me the outline. Okay, so it gives me an outline here, which is fine. We'll just want to drag it to the top right and then zoom in. Let's go and change the background color to whatever the background color is on our previous applications. And we might as well just save this. We can call this background. Now I'll work through this search artboard rather quickly just because we're getting familiar with Framer Web. We'll rename the artboard to search, and I'll want to copy and paste from our previous artboard. So we can copy this search input, and then we'll push it up along to where it's 60 pixels margin top. Let's zoom in a bit. Now I'll want to adjust the width so that we can add a cancel button to allow us to exit out of this search screen. We'll insert a new text, and we'll call this cancel. Let's capitalize the C. We'll adjust the font size to where it's 14 pixels. We'll leave it as book, and we'll adjust the color to purple. Let's go ahead and grab cancel and then set it to where it's margin right of 20 pixels. We could do it like so, and then just make sure that it is center aligned vertically, and then we can adjust the width to where it's 20 pixels right of the cancel button. So it's going to be a total width of 310 pixels. Now we'll move on to the recent searches. So I am going to grab what we have for section date, and let's go ahead and paste that here. It's going to be pushed to the very top, but we'll adjust that accordingly. So go ahead and set it to the far left and allow for 20 pixels of margin top. And then we can hit fit content and we'll adjust it. We can get rid of this purple notification and then switch today to where it can say recent searches, and then allow for margin left of 20 pixels. We can select section date, and let's go ahead and rename it. We can just call it recent and select fit content to fit the content. Finally, I will create a list of the different recent searches that our users already searched for. We'll use this default stack component that Framer provides. And what it does is it allows us to create a stack and then switch between those stacks without needing to worry about margin because we'll set it defined, one time. So honestly, it's better if I show you. We'll select stack, And then let's go ahead and it doesn't matter what the height is right now, but just make sure that the widths allow for the margin of 20 pixels of left and right. In terms of its direction, we have an option to change direction from left to right or up and down, or top and bottom, sorry. We'll select top and bottom. For our distribution, we'll select start just so that it can be pushed to the very top. And before we continue, let's add a layer here just so that we can show you how it works. We'll create a new text layer and add it here. This first text layer is going to be called my doggo, and my doggo is going to receive a size of 14 pixels. The style is going to be set to medium, and our color is going to be black. Now let's push the my doggo to the far left. So we'll select it, and actually we can't push it to the far left because we don't have a frame. So we'll do that manually. Or no, we can't even do it manually. Okay, this is a perfect time to explain stack. So you can see that I can't move it around because the stack alignment, if we select the stack, you can see that the alignment is set to the center. I can move it left, I can move it right. But since having the alignment center, it won't let me move it. Now, if I wanted to add more layers, what it's going to do is give me that fixed layer. So as I'm copying and dragging, you could see that it's giving me to where the margins are always going to be 20 pixels. We can adjust that by setting a gap. If we adjust the gap, you can see that it's going to move the margins of top and bottom. If I were to change the direction, it will move the margins from left to right. So that's just really neat in my opinion, and I think it's just pretty cool for Framer to allow us to do this. We'll switch the direction back to top and bottom, and I'm going to delete these additional layers because what we're going to do is create one frame and then just copy and paste it. So let's just create that initial frame rather than needing to edit those frames that we already created. So I will set the alignment to start, and I will move the stack to where it's 24 pixels of margin top. And in the my doggo, I'll create a new frame. So I'll add a frame, and then nested inside this frame, we want to add an X button to allow us to delete our recent search. So of course, we're going to rely on the feather icons. So let's search for close. I don't think it does anything there. What about X? Okay, so X is an icon here. We'll insert that. Now I'm going to select the frame and adjust the width so they could have a margin of 20 pixels on the right. So selecting this frame here and then just making sure that it's 374. And this X is going to be nested inside the frame. And so we're going to call frame item 1. Make sure that it is nested inside, right? Because if it was outside of item 1, here's what will happen. It will follow the order of the stack because it will be nested in the stack. However, nesting it inside item 1 would allow us to move the X around without needing to create a stack. So as long as it's in the same height of the item 1 frame. Now this X icon's far too big, so let's change it to 16 pixels for the width and the height. And then let's just make sure that it is aligned with the text. So we can see that it's perfectly aligned there, and its margin right is 20 pixels. Now we can go ahead and copy and paste item 1 several times, and it will automatically adjust for the margins. So it's just much easier for us to work. Now the gap isn't going to be 29, which we randomly set. It's going to be 32. From there, we can then adjust the text. So I'll switch this to design system. And for the last one, we can call it organizational chart. Last thing I want to cover is for our inputs, but first we can select stack and select fit content, and this will adjust the frame's height to the content height. Lastly, go ahead and select the input, and what we can do here is we can make this input focused on this screen. You won't see the keyboard in the preview. However, if you select this mobile device and scan the QR code through the Framer app, once you land on this search screen, the keyboard would automatically be open. So the idea here is let's zoom out. When we select search goodies on the input for actually the scroller, we are then going to be taking the user to the search, and we'll use magic motion, which is similar to auto animate. I believe it's called magic motion. Let's test it out. We can select search goodies here, and then we can hit the L, which will allow us to link. And then we will say not on change, not on submit, on focus. So once we focus, we will take it to this screen. And then for our focus interaction, we'll select transition, and the type is magic motion, which is, like I said, similar to the auto animate feature in Adobe. If we go ahead and test it out, I'm not going to completely do this here because this will be in our next episode for the prototype. But if we hit scroller and select it, you can see that it's almost there. Let's try that one more time. Let's select scroll so that we can update. Do we need to refresh? Yeah. So we can scroll up and down. If we select search goodies, it will take us to this recent search. So it isn't 100% perfect. You can see that the my doggo or the history here kind of just pops up, but we can adjust that in the next video. Okay, perfect. So that's all we're going to cover in terms of UI for this section. What we're doing in the next episode is using react.js for our scroller. If I go ahead and refresh, what's going to happen when we start coding with React is that we're going to adjust the way that our header behaves when the user scrolls. Right now, when the user scrolls, it just stays the same. However, in the next episode, we are going to cover how we can adjust this to where it interacts with the user, make this fix when the user has scrolled a certain amount, and then when we scroll back up, how do we bring that back? That's gonna do it here for this episode. If you did enjoy, leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, and have a wonderful day.